Welcome to the Good Divorce Show, where we can help you learn how to navigate the journey of divorce with less conflict, less debt, and equip you not to just get divorced, but also learn how to be divorced. Your host, certified divorce coach Karen McNenny, shares her wealth of knowledge, gets advice from other relationship experts, and interviews couples who learn how to have a good divorce, so you can too. Now here's your host, Karen.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for joining me today. I am Karen McNenny, your good divorce coach. And today we are chatting with Elizabeth Douglas, founder of the Douglas Family Law Group in New York. She is a visionary attorney who has built a reputation as a fierce advocate for her clients. And as you hear her chat today, you will hear that commitment. She leads a dynamic team of legal professionals who share her passion for delivering exceptional results for clients who indeed are facing complex family law and divorce matters. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Karen. It's been great chatting with you.
Elizabeth's innovative and educational approach to her cases has earned her recognition as one of the most highly acclaimed family law and divorce attorneys in the industry. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth Douglas.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here.
We're delighted to have you and your many years of wisdom and experience. I want to start with what you identify as this customized approach to divorce, that you really take each client and wrap your services around their needs. Now, for our listeners who may be on the other side of the legal part, they might just be thinking about divorce. Maybe they are currently, if you will, shopping for the right legal support. Tell us a little bit about within your firm what customization means and what folks should be looking and listening for as they consider a legal partner.
It means something different to each client. And I love that you use the term legal partner because that's what the relationship with a divorce attorney and their clients or a divorce firm and their clients should be. So when we say that we customize our legal approach, we mean literally in our first meeting with our clients, we are talking about their goals, their objectives, how they would like to act next after they're forced to pivot. Because unless you're completely insane, no one gets married with the hopes of getting divorced, dividing assets, putting up their children. But the reality is that it presents you with a pivot point. And your pivot point and my pivot point are different because we're different people, we have different families. So our legal team really takes the time to sit with the clients. And in that initial strategy session, what we're doing is really asking the questions about what life could look like next, what's important to them, what they want to advance, what they are maybe don't want to advance, and what are their non-negotiables. There's a term called BATNA. What's their BATNA? Like, what is their minimum proposition for their deal breaker, essentially, right? And when we're talking about those things, we're helping them to create what the next step of life looks like. All the while, we're also advising them on the law. And then we're starting to formulate that initial legal strategy about what we should do. Is this a client that it wants to start with a mediated approach? Or is this a circumstance where we have to start with litigation, hoping to dial back later? Or we just prepping for trial right away? But either way, you can't make any approach work until you know where you want to go and what's important to you. So that's the custom tailored effect, because we don't have a cookie cutter approach in my firm. Our firm really offers that white glove service that allows you to go in the direction that's best for you. And we're going to advocate for our clients as best we can, as best supported by the law. In some instances, looking outside of traditional law to make arguments that can be recognized. A lot of times you can bring in laws of other states and then apply them to New York law and then speak with the judges and try to really advance and push, because we'd like to be that aggressive and proactive voice for the clients.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've got listeners not only all over the U.S., but sometimes also our global audience out there. So what I'm hearing you say is that when you go in to have a pre-consultation with a law firm, what would be some of the key questions you would tell our listeners that they should be asking and thinking about as they take on a legal partner?
It depends what type of case. If we were to speak in the context of just divorce, because of course we do all things family law related, but in just divorce, the first thing would be to sit down and think about what you want. Because again, it's a time now where we've got change. So have that in mind, because when you're doing an initial consultation with any attorney, you have to be able to explain what you're looking for. You don't have to know the law and you don't have to feel pressured, but you've got to be able to say, hey, to me, the most important thing is X. Or perhaps you're someone who says, you know what? I need to have custody of the kids for these reasons. That's what's most aggressive. Or maybe you're someone saying, hey, we don't have children, but to me, how we're dividing the assets is important. I need to have X, Y, and Z. So know what you want first. Whether or not you can get it, know what you want, because your time with this lawyer is to get your questions answered. You've likely paid a consultation fee, make the most out of it. The next is to have the questions about things that are pressing to you. You know, we all have different bugs in our ears or different thoughts, right? So there is no wrong question in the context of speaking with someone who's going to be your legal partner. And it's a good idea to have all kinds of questions ready, because you want to be thinking and paying close attention to how they respond. It's almost like when you go to a doctor's appointment, right? We've all been sick where you see the doctor and maybe the bedside manner is kind of prickly, and now you feel a little bit worse. You feel like you haven't been heard, or you feel like, wait, you didn't really talk to me, but you wrote me a prescription. That's not who you want, especially if we're talking about a contested situation that might go on through trial, where you're going to be partners with this person, you know, a personal firm who's going to be your voice before the court, your advocate, and most importantly, the person telling your story. So it's important to see what the synergy is. Yes, you want someone skilled and experienced for sure, but you also want to feel that synergy, because you're entering into potentially a relationship that could last a couple years. So that's important. And paying attention to how your body feels too is important, because, you know, we all have that sixth sense in us. So if you're getting these vibes like this is someone who keeps on cutting you off, or they're not listening, that might not be your person.
Mm-hmm. I love that sixth sense. And sometimes we underestimate that thing that we can't quite point to. But honestly, our bodies can't lie. And so you're having a sensation of any kind, pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. Now, clearly you have walked this journey for more than a decade. And me as a divorce coach and you as a divorce lawyer, I've certainly heard people say, why would you ever want to do this work? And just giving us a little bit of context of what brought you to the work, but more importantly as a lawyer, because I think we get intimidated, or we think the lawyers are going to blow everything up or make it worse. What do you personally find satisfying, and what keeps you engaged and committed to doing this work?
So first, of course, I've heard people say, how can you do that? I've heard colleagues, you know, I didn't always practice divorce and family law. I spent the first 7.5 years of my career, my legal career, in commercial litigation, doing jury trials, doing medical malpractice work. So advocating for people in a different way. So a lot of those colleagues will laugh and say, oh my gosh, the drama, I can't imagine the drama. I actually enjoy that, because one thing that I felt personally was missing when I did not practice divorce and family law was a personal connection with people. This area of the law really allows myself and my team to have a connection, because we're dealing with people on a very human level. You have their relationships, their idea about what they thought the future would be, their children, their finances, their overall situation, all rolled into one, where you, as an advocate, get to use the law to help them solve their problems. And my practice ethic and the practice of my team is to not just help them solve their problems, but to thrive afterwards. So I think it's a great challenge. It's something I like to be in. I like to be up close and personal and know what's going on. And yes, from time to time, there's drama, and our team welcomes that too, in a positive way.
Yeah, well, we're singing off the same page of music, Elizabeth, and I find it incredibly rewarding, because I know that the work that we do is in service to the family. If there are children involved, helping to navigate, and not just the getting divorced, but now you're going to live divorced. Mm-hmm. And so this idea that you really promote of, we need to think about your future, not just this short-sighted getting through the legal aspects, but how that's going to impact your future life. What are some of the mistakes that you see when people are short-sighted, or what they should be considering more in the long term?
First, making decisions based upon emotion, and either ignoring their lawyer or not sharing how they really feel with their legal team. It is normal and it's human, especially going through divorce, to feel emotional. I have never met any client, and I've never had an experience in my own life where emotions don't get involved at some point. But it's important to give yourself the grace to grieve the picture of what you had and then move forward. You hire a legal team because you want that team to advance your interest and take care of the law while you can take care of yourself. It's important to let them do that job. And we always refer all of our clients to get the appropriate synergy with a mental health professional, not because they're crazy, but because they need a deeper level of support to get through this life change, which sometimes is almost like a death because you're grieving the death of what you thought would be there. So getting that in place and having a team that you trust to allow to deal with the legal stuff, the stress, a lot of times speaking to and negotiating on your behalf with your ex, that relieves a lot of pressure so you can focus on yourself, your children if you have them, and get back to your baseline and even thrive from there. Those things are very important.
Yes. And it's not just the emotion of the clients, quite honestly. We as professionals in the industry come with our own emotional responses and those tendencies of biases. How do you keep those in check? And again, what should clients be looking for to make sure they are going to be with a lawyer who can keep their own emotions in check?
Well, I can answer the question two ways. I'm human just like my clients, but
Yeah.
that's what I preach. We are a mind, body, and soul forward thinking firm, right? So myself and my team, we're all fully invested in making sure that we're physically healthy, emotionally healthy. We've gotten breaks. We try to avoid burnout. I mean, I work out, I eat well, I get the support I need at various times. And most importantly, you have to have thick skin to do this work. You have to know not to take it personally because it's very seldom personal. It's usually about someone who's going through a transition they're trying to navigate. So if someone's short with you, it's not usually a personal thing. And I teach that to my team. We respect that with our clients too. And I think if you're looking at it from the litigant's end or the client's end, it is really taking the time to do that initial consultation. And then as you're working with your advocate, know what's important to you, right? And see if they've given you guidelines. When a client signs up with our team, the first thing they get is a welcome package. Yes, there's some lovely, swag and things, but there's also a welcome book that explains the process. It explains how to contact us, when to contact us. We set boundaries and expectations so that you know when will my email get answered. Okay, you know what the time frame is. That way you're not anxious and you're not feeling like it didn't in that second you're being ignored. You never ignore the clients. We do little things too, like we have regular weekly touch bases via Zoom or in person where we can talk about what's going on. So that kind of gets them that anxiety out of the way ahead of time that people often face with the process. We do education. We have lots of webinars and in-office events where we're talking about different topics of law, asking questions, getting them answered. Sometimes there's delicate topics that people don't want to directly ask. But if you do a sit and speak where there's some, appetizers, wine involved and you're talking about it, and there's more than one person, people feel comfortable. We address those things. We often partner with different professionals who affect what we do. So financial professionals, mental health therapists. We recently did something with a Pilates instructor, etc. Just being a resource and referring our clients to other people so they have a community and they're not alone. Those things are important. But I think, again, it goes back to, as the client, it's making sure you selected a team where you feel comfortable, which is different than you're not looking for a best friend because you have best friends. Lawyers are very expensive best friends to have. You don't want that to be a relationship. You want to allow the lawyer and the legal team to do their job, which is advocate for you legally by being transparent and honest. The beautiful thing about the attorney-client relationship is that there's an attorney-client privilege. Your lawyer can't talk about your business. It's not their job, and they shouldn't be judging you. So you should be able to empower them with everything, the good and the bad. I tell the clients, tell it to me completely. Good, bad, you've heard everything. It's a no judgment zone. That way we can formulate the best of best. The worst thing you can do as a client is secret information, not tell the lawyer stuff, try to pretty it up. And then we show up in court. Your spouse's side knows that. And then there it is, either blown up in an exhibit, in a text, online, whatever it is. No matter what the issue is, if we know about it, we can be proactive, we can triage the issue and we can get it done. So it's feeling safe enough in that space. And I think it's also having realistic expectations because the things you can't control as a client or as a litigant are the court's calendar, as frustrating as that is. If you've got a contested divorce, it will not be resolved in day one. So you should ask your team, how long will it take? What's going on? Have them explain. You also want to make sure that your legal team is available to answer your questions. Because the worst thing is to be going through a new situation that's full of stress and highly emotional and should try to get in touch with the team that you're paying a lot of money to and they don't respond. That's a red flag. So you want to look for things like that. You also want to make sure that your team can answer direct questions and that you get an answer. If you're presenting something that doesn't have an immediate answer, requires legal research, that's not a red flag. But the red flag is if it's never ever addressed or brought to the table. you should feel heard as a client. It's imperative.
Such great advice in there. And I'm just noting, as you speak with such eloquence and really mastery of this part of the industry, you come to it also through the female lens. And it has, the courts have been very male dominated, and the legal arena. I'm just curious on a personal level what that has been like for you, and that kind of idea of, you're fighting for your place in the industry and how that shows up as you fight for your clients.
Well, first, thank you. But yes, I am a female, and it's been an evolution at different parts of my career. I can remember being a young lawyer out of law school, female, being extra prepared. I'm someone who goes the extra mile in everything. So I'll be 110% prepared. But I remember being that young lawyer, being female, being ready to go. And sometimes the male counterpart trying to ignore me or trying to speak over me or make it seem like I wasn't researched. I don't deal with that. I am someone who needs to be heard and will be heard. So I can do it in a very professional way. I'm always professional. I'm always polished, but my point will be made. And especially with respect to court and trials and litigation, always prepared, always advancing my client's narrative. And it's about telling their story and advancing that. So persistence wins. I remember one time, this is actually funny. This is about 15 years ago. And I had an older male attorney basically saying, don't worry your pretty little head. I've been doing this for years and that's not how it's done. So I was raised to be very respectful, but I'm also the youngest of three. So I know how to be heard if I have to be. My siblings are older. And I took a deep breath and I said, you know what? I appreciate that you're doing that. But sometimes doing something for a long time doesn't mean you do well. The statute says this, and this is what's going to be happening for me and my client. So respectfully, I will still be speaking with the judge. I think he almost fell down and died. Not literally. Because I was, I'm petite. And at this time, I was out of school maybe 3 years. And this was someone who, like he said, had been doing it for years. Didn't bother to look at the new case law, didn't bother to recognize that the case law he was citing was old, and that he didn't know the new statute, which I thought was embarrassing. He wasn't 5 because he was advocating in the, the old boys club, which is the who barks the loudest is there, and everybody's playing golf and hanging out together. And I'm this new young lawyer who wasn't yet invited to those things, but I won in court. Preparation, perseverance, and you don't have to be rude. You just have to be firm in your position.
Oh my goodness. Well, when we come back from the break, we're chatting today with Elizabeth Douglas, founder of the Douglas Family Law Group. And we're going to hear a little bit about what are the steps to stay out of court and the mediation process and negotiating and recognizing that nobody's going to get 100% of what they want. And we're looking for something that is equitable, which is different than equal. Stay tuned, listeners. Here on the Good Divorce Show, I'm Karen McNinney, your Good Divorce Coach. We'll be right back.
Are you thinking about getting divorced? Before you call a lawyer, call the Good Divorce Coach, Karen McNinney, a certified divorce counselor, co-parenting specialist, and mediator. Karen's signature Good Divorce experience will guide you through your divorce journey, from the day you make that difficult decision to the day the decree is signed, all for a predictable fee. The Good Divorce Coach will teach you and your partner how to get divorced and be divorced with less conflict and less debt. Visit thegooddivorcecoach.com to get in touch with Karen.
Now, back to the show with Karen.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for sticking with me today. I'm Karen McNinney, your Good Divorce Coach, here on the Good Divorce Show, chatting with founder of the Douglas Family Law Group, Elizabeth Douglas, who is committed to her client satisfaction, her relentless pursuit of excellence, and dedication to helping her clients achieve the life they envision for the next chapter. Those things are closely intertwined for Elizabeth. She is a certified mediator and a trial attorney who is unafraid to push the envelope in the courtroom. But we want to talk right now with you, Elizabeth, about how to stay out of court.
That's a great topic. So staying out of court or avoiding trial is sort of the mindset. So, of course, you've got a great legal team, a strong advocate on your position. More than likely your spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse does too. But it is about, again, knowing what's important to you and then knowing what you can walk away from But most importantly, recognizing that in a good negotiation, no one gets 100% of what they want. So
Can you repeat that? Because I think this is really important.
nobody gets 100% of what they want in a true settlement or a real negotiation. You've got to be willing to let something go. You also, the smart negotiator, comes from a perspective of understanding what it is that their ex-partner might want, what they want, knowing the reasons why, and knowing where your leverage is. But specifically in context of divorce litigation, your case is going to be resolved in two ways. You're either going to enter into a stipulation of settlement to be filed with your divorce papers, or you're going to have a trial, and that person sitting down in the black robe is going to hear evidence from you, from your spouse, from your experts, whatever. You're going to pay thousands of dollars for that evidence to be brought before the court in the appropriate form, thousands of dollars for both lawyers on both sides to prepare, thousands of dollars for the attorney for your children if one's appointed to get there, et cetera, et cetera. There's multiple day trials. And then eventually there's going to be a decision by the judge, and then you'll be divorced. Now, trial is appropriate in certain circumstances. There are some times when you can't negotiate. That's true. At the same time, there are times when you don't need to go to trial. You can have some strong negotiations back and forth, keep your mindset in check, trust your attorney, work with them, and you can do little things like having the four-way conference. That means yourself, your attorney, your spouse, their attorney, trying to hash out and narrow down issues. The less issues you have to bring before the court, the better it's going to be for you emotionally and financially. And then also when you're negotiating, it's recognizing that since you're not going to get 100%, what should you really advance, right? What should you push? When should you fold? You know, all divorce lawyers talk about some client sometime that they had who thought about something that really at the end was not worth it. For example, I can recall a litigation I did early on where we were talking about a Stickley Audi coffee table. Beautiful table, but subjective in taste, first of all. And second of all, what they paid for the table initially was not what they paid after they fought. We fought for months over this table. And it was a matter of both people being so emotionally tied to what the table represented. Not even loving the table. It was more of if I can't have it, you can't either. Right? So if you have a client that way, you want to be respectful that it could be a negotiable reaction. But it's really important for good lawyers to point out what a pain point might be. And to talk about what could be the worst case scenario if maybe you walked away from that coffee table, right? You let the other side have it. Perhaps there is some money that you can get from the account on your side as a credit. Perhaps maybe the money you save in paying both lawyers, the attorney for the child, and the judge, you'll get 10 coffee tables. But able to help people to realize when things are emotion versus reality and the things to push for. Oftentimes the things to push for are things that will set you up in your future for success, as opposed to things that you can replace easily, right? You can't replace your kids. And a lot of times if you worry about your future and your retirement past certain ages, it's hard to make that money back. So maybe you think about fighting for that as opposed to things that are replaceable or insignificant. But it does tend to find out what's important to people and why. Because similarly, that same coffee table example, maybe that coffee table came from one spouse from a relative who's deceased and it has significant sentimental value and it can't be replaced. Then you know that, you push for the coffee table and maybe you concede somewhere else. But the whole point is it's mindset and being open to making concessions, being open to knowing that moving forward and having more control over what happens to your life, your asset, your children, that more control happens in your stipulation of settlement, your mediation, your negotiation. Because once you go to trial, all bets are off, and the person in that black robe is in charge of what happens to you. And when you think about that, most people can dial it back and try to negotiate, but they have more control.
Right. And the coffee table, of course, as I'm sure many of our listeners of a certain age are also having a flashback to when Harry met Sally and the ugly wagon wheel coffee table that you fight for just because you want to fight. And, you know, that anger and hurt and pain really is just keeping you from your next chapter. It's keeping you from thriving. And at the end of the day, you know, sometimes we'll do the 5-on-5 test, like, will it matter in 5 minutes? Probably still, yes, you're going to be, but in 5 weeks, in 5 months, in 5 years, because that's the foundation as you go through your divorce. It's not just about getting divorced. It's about how are you going to be divorced as a result of these decisions and your behavior towards each other. And we get so hot and so hurt. I think there's a certain kind of betrayal that both parties feel like this was supposed to be forever and it's not. And then they take it out on each other. And there is just no long-term value in that.
I agree with that 100%. And you're absolutely right, because majority of things and majority of inability to negotiate comes from being hurt first, right? So it's recognizing where that hurt is, trying to dissect that hurt with your lawyer, with your mental health professional, with your friend group, with your family, and then allowing the legal professional to go in and do their job because they're not personally hurt. Remember that it's good because they're an objective third party, right? So they want to advance your interests. That's very helpful. And that goes back to making sure that you have that relationship where you trust the person you hired to advocate for you. Because most of us are not easily able to open up about what really the root cause is if we don't trust someone. So that's why it's important to hire someone who you trust both professionally to advance your interests, but someone who you feel comfortable enough with that they can do an excellent job, but that they'll hear you to advance your interests and not just theirs, or try to take the easy way out and get you to settle when you shouldn't settle, or get you to fold because maybe they have a different agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea of this impartial person who isn't wound up in the emotion of it. I just had a conversation with a client, and in the Good Divorce Experience, I often work with the couple. We start with a collaborative pursuit from the beginning, and I meet with them individually and together and individually and together. And the female was saying, I don't even know how to even have a conversation with him, Karen. He is so annoying and he just irritates the hell out of me. I said, well, it's easy for me. I've never been married to him.
You just see him for what he is.
That's right. And at the end of the day, it's like, just let it go. It isn't going to matter, but it's hard to have that perspective when you're in the heat of it. Now, one of the things you mentioned in terms of, this idea of what is it that you want, which is where I also start with my clients. Like, what is the most important things? Is it the table? Is it the house? Or is it your long-term finances? Or more importantly, for families, couples that have children, is that custody conversation and access to the kids and support of the children. Now, you have a very special passion for the dads in this story, as do I, because there have been historically laws and forecasting and agreements that were very mom biased. Tell me what that looks like currently through the law, the lens of the law. Of course, you're in New York. It may differ from state to state, but also why it's so important that we're advocating for both parents.
Well, our office and the attorneys in my office, we all practice in New York and Connecticut. So I can speak from that lens of those two states, which incidentally is a little bit different in each state. But in general, over the last 25 years, the laws have evolved very much. So when there used to be the breastfeeding doctrine or the thought that, children have to stay with their mom, that doesn't exist anymore, because the current standard for child custody is the best interest of the child. Nowhere in that standard does it say the best interest is with mom or dad or whatnot. There's no gender defined. So truly, when you're building a custody case, it's important to have the narrative of historically what's happened in the family, right? Which parent does most fit? Again, that's not based on gender. That's based upon who really knows these kids, who takes them to their appointments, who takes care of their emotional, physical, mental, spiritual needs, who's the one who goes to PTA conferences, who's the parent who is emotionally fit to do the best job. And that can change sometimes. Sometimes you're dealing with parents who are dealing with a substance abuse problem or an alcohol problem, or they have anger management issues, right? All issues that can be mitigated in some sense, or you can give training and coaching and sometimes mental health services to help. But significant, because for children to thrive, they need to be in a stable environment and they need someone who can look out and take care of them, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you're on the plane, they say the oxygen mask comes on, you put your mask on first, and then you help small children and the elderly. You've got to be sound to help your children thrive. So that's important to consider. And that being sound in every way has nothing to do with whether you're male or female. And that long as the notion that dad was bad or dad cheated, then dad can't take care of the kids. Well, the best interest of the child standard does not take into consideration fidelity in a relationship. So that's point one. There might be certain gender roles where they get stereotyped being bad and hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. That shouldn't really factor into a long-term custody determination. Sometimes it does. Sometimes we get great dads, so you've got to dispel that method to the court and just talk about the reality of the situation. But what is equalized typically is that children thrive when they have significant, meaningful relationships with both parents, whether that is two dads, two moms, a mom and a dad, whatever the combination looks like. So the goal is to make sure that the child will thrive. Both parents have significant access and time to have a meaningful part in raising their children. Mm-hmm. So our job as advocates when we get in dad, it's to go through all of that, paint the narrative to the court in the way that it is, which shows that our client might be superior. Now, we also heard of lots of amazing moms too, and we're doing the same thing there, right? Making sure that that narrative is told, but not going into court assuming that gender is going to make the call or that money is going to make the call. Because sometimes the work parent is the one who doesn't have as much money. You know, there's some people who also think that, okay, more money, better raising a child. Well, that's not usually true, right? Similarly, the flip side, though, is that if you are destitute and living in your car, it's going to be difficult to provide a stable environment for your child. So there's got to be a balancing act there.
Yeah. You had a client at one point who really thought that they wouldn't have equal access or custody to their children because of their gender. Yep. Tell us a little more about how that unfolded.
We get a lot of fathers who come in and right away, smart, brilliant, professional men who assume that, well, you know what, the law just favors moms, so I don't even have a chance to fight. But P.S., I'm doing this wonderful full-time job. I'm the one who packs the lunches. I coach Little League. I do all the things. My soon-to-be ex-wife has whatever issue, is there. So we let the clients know, you know what? No, especially under our watch. We're going to fight for you. We're going to tell the narrative. Several clients in particular fit this bill, but I'm thinking of one in particular who makes me smile all the time. So he had come in, and the romantic relationship between he and his wife definitely had soured. They were getting a divorce. He actually was going to be getting remarried at some point, so he's the one who wanted the divorce for various reasons. Again, fidelity in a marriage plays no bearing on someone's fitness parent, as long as your children aren't being exposed to anything which would make them feel disloyal or inappropriate. But in any event, he came in, and his wife had decided that because he had fallen out of love with her, he was no longer entitled to see either of his two daughters, period. He cut off visitation, access, changed his cell phone number, locked him out, took his name off of this card at school, all the horrible things. And he was really suffering because he's someone who, from when the children were born, had a meaningful involvement, in fact, was the primary parent in terms of the legal definition of that. And he was devastated. And he fought. And one of the things when the court considers when determining the overall best interest of the child is whether or not the custodial parent will foster a meaningful relationship with the other parent. That's something he hadn't considered because he didn't know. And you can be an amazing mom, so to speak, and do all these things, but if you are alienating your child from their father or from their other parents, that's a problem. If you're someone who is very clear that you don't and cannot foster a relationship, that's a problem. Those are ways that custody can be shifted. And we did go through a trial. We had a forensic. We got custody shifted. But it's interesting because of the false allegations mom had made, she put a lot of very ugly things into the narrative, a lot of poison with the children. So we had to start from supervised access initially while we discussed those allegations. Our client was humble. He took in his strides. And when he had time, another allegation mom made was that he couldn't take care of the children. They were girls. He didn't know how to care for them. This guy went above and beyond, and he paid a hairdresser to teach him how to wash, condition, flat iron, and braid hair. And I couldn't believe it because he had the pictures as he was trying. And in the beginning, it looked a little crazy. But towards the end, it was amazing. And his daughters were raving about how they wanted daddy to do their hair. He went above and beyond. And this was a guy with a big job on Wall Street, a lot of other priorities, but his children were the apple of his eye, the most important thing. And he didn't want to be separated. He also was able to cater better to their special needs. He had a lot more patience. One of the children was special. She's autistic. And she was on the spectrum. There was IEPs in place. Mom didn't have the patience or tolerance. She said very hurtful things. This client was able to diffuse them, but in a way where he did not alienate mom. And always trying to foster the co-parenting relationship. As he got back his custody little by little, he always had the girls reach out to mom, FaceTime mom, make mom a Mother's Day card, all the things that would never happen. Anyway, fast forwarding for sake of time and brevity, we had to go to a trial for various reasons, and we prevailed at trial. And he was given primary custody and access, but there was still a meaningful schedule for mom, and the children are thriving. So in a custody case, you don't really win, because again, the best scenario is when both parents can co-parent and the kids have access. Your children should never feel like they have to choose, pick, feel disloyal.
Unbelievable.
Times where it's appropriate to make a shift in custody. This was one of them, and those children are driving.
What a beautiful story for that father.
Yeah.
And I hope that the dads listening today also really hear the commitment. Again, we want children to have access to both parents. That is ideal. And whether that's two dads or two moms or all the beautiful shades of the rainbow, as you mentioned, here we now have legal same-sex marriage in our country, which means we now have legal same-sex divorce. Is there anything that, from your perspective and entering into this new arena, is different or should be considered through a different lens as a result of a same-sex marriage?
I don't think different, because in same-sex marriages, especially with children, you're still dealing with two parents who love their children, who have to figure out how to uncouple while having meaningful access to raising their children, shaping these humans who are going to be our future. So that doesn't change regardless of gender affiliation or whether you're in a same-sex marriage. What does change, and being really candid and honest, is being able to advocate for your clients sometimes where you have a judge who might not be comfortable in that shift of what the modern family looks like, and making sure that you are advancing the case law, advancing your client's position, and not focusing on things that are irrelevant. Gender or sexual orientation is irrelevant in raising a child appropriately. Fitness to parent is what matters the most. And able to do that. Same thing with divorcing your marriage or coupling, because what we're talking about is a marital relationship that's gone bad. So in a typical divorce, if you have children, you have custody issues, then you have equitable distribution issues. Nowhere in there do you have who you're married to issues. You just have a relationship that's gone bad. So I think as the advocate, remembering that and then recognizing what's important to your clients is important, while also being cognizant of the fact that there might be parties, whether it's the court or whether it's the attorney for the child or experts that you have, who might have their own biases towards it and use that to taint or color decisions that they make, whether consciously or unconsciously. So I think being acutely aware and working with your clients to let them know that you're not fazed by that and you're going to fight for them as a person and what their narrative is and how they want their next steps to look. That's what's important.
Oh, wonderful. And I think an important and timely conversation in our culture at this time. We are chatting today with founder of the Douglas Family Law Group, Elizabeth Douglas, visionary trial attorney, mediator. And I am just curious as we wrap up, if there is something that comes to mind as those little nuggets of wisdom, Elizabeth, that clients should keep in mind as they move through this so they can actually thrive on the other side of their divorce experience.
You know, the first thing, and it's interesting because this work is always evolving. We're always evolving as professionals. We're always evolving as people. One thing I've learned in my personal life that I didn't always do when I was younger was give myself a little bit of grace. Clients need to be able to give themselves some grace. There's going to be ugly feelings that come up when your relationship is ending. You have to allow yourself to get through that. There is no perfect divorce. You're not going to be on your A game every moment. Some days you think you've moved ahead and like you can just break down and cry. That's okay. As long as you can then get up, brush your shoulders off, and move on. So it's self-grace. It's recognizing that every day is an opportunity, whether it sounds cliche or not. And I'm not trying to minimize a relationship or a marriage. It's significant to all of us. But when a marriage ends, it's a pivot point. So when you give yourself grace and you allow yourself to grieve, now the opportunity before you, and it's just that, is to envision what your next chapter is going to look like. What do you want it to be? And get really real and granular with what that looks like. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? How do you see yourself? What are you wearing? Where are you living? What are your kids smiling? Are they laughing? In your new home cooking dinner? What does the new table look like? The table that you negotiated. Like all of those things, they really matter. So just taking the time to really feel the feelings, go through the process, be smart by hiring someone who's experienced. I tell everybody, hire an experienced divorce family law firm. You want experts. You don't want the person, respectfully of my colleagues who practice many things. If I'm getting divorced, I want someone who's an expert and they practice only that. I don't want the guy or the girl that does a little DUI, a little traffic ticket here, personal injury here, med mal there. No, I want a firm or a lawyer who can advocate for me, who knows all the nuances of what's going on. That's important. especially when you have assets. You want someone who works with financial experts. You want someone who knows how to negotiate, someone who can work with a forensic, etc. Once you've done that and you've hired a competent team, let them do their job. You work on getting yourself to the point where you can move forward and thrive, not just move forward and survive. If you have children, make sure you get to the point where you can be strong for you and amazing for them, and then move on with grace. That's what I would say.
Ah, wonderful words for us to wrap up the Good Divorce Show today with Elizabeth Douglas. Clearly, she understands the unique challenges that individuals and families face during divorce or separation, and providing guidance and support through every step of that legal process, currently practicing in New York and Connecticut. But wisdom that crosses all state borders. So, Elizabeth, I'm sure there are listeners with us today who want more from the Douglas Family Law Firm. Where can we find you? What additional resources are available?
Well, we are all over social media, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc. We also have a lot of great resources. We do webinars on LinkedIn Live. They're uploaded onto our Instagram, etc. But we also have a podcast that's going to be launched in August 2024. It's called Breaking Down the D, and it's like a candid look about divorce, the real deal about what happens, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're paired with some amazing experts. We've got one with a cryptocurrency expert who talks about, how people can hide currency in divorce. We have one with a forensic psychologist. We talk about what it's like to be married to a narcissist. How do you deal with a narcissist in divorce? How do you deal with a narcissist in a custody battle? We have another on crazy prenups and how a prenup is actually romantic and not a divorce planning tool, but then also some celebrity prenups and what we had through them. We try to think of topics that people can resonate with, where they can get some information and where they can get the unfiltered version. A lot of times, especially when you speak to a lawyer, one of our bad lawyer stereotypes is that we use all legalese and we have to be well learned and heretofore found. That's not breaking down the D. Breaking down is the real with what's up with what's happening in divorce and family law.
That's great. August 2024, launching yet another podcast across all platforms, and looking for those resources on LinkedIn, those workshops, as well as just DouglasFamilyLawFirm.com.
DouglasLaw.com. Yep.
DouglasLaw.com. Thanks again, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Do you have questions or thoughts about this week's episode? Let us know by following the Good Divorce Coach on Facebook and Instagram @GoodDivorceCoach, and leave a comment. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific, or listen anytime wherever you get your podcasts.